Hi friends, I'm Scott Hanselman. I'm here in my house in Portland, Oregon, but I wish I could be with you right now celebrating .NET and talking about .NET in China. I'm sorry it's so far, but I thought what I could do is make you a special video to tell you how I think about .NET and .NET Core 3.0. So let's see some low-level demos and some interesting things so that you can share with your friends and colleagues how .NET Core works, why it's exciting, and what's coming next for the future of .NET. All right, now I said I would show lots of demos, and I'm going to try to spend most of my time at the command line because I want you to understand what's inside .NET. But at the same time, it's really important to point out and to keep emphasizing that it's your platform for building anything. The whole point about .NET in 2019 and in 2020 is you can build anything with it. In the past, .NET was a Windows thing. You would install it on Windows. Sometimes Windows wouldn't have .NET installed, and you'd have to install .NET first and then install your app. We want .NET to be something that you can build anything for. If you want to write a watch app, you should do it in .NET. If you want to write an app for a Raspberry Pi, you can do it in .NET. If you want to write an app for a video game or Xbox, Nintendo Switch, C#, Unity, do it in .NET. You want to write a mobile app, Android, iPhone, whatever makes you happy. You want to write machine learning code, you can do it in .NET. You can build anything. It's not just .NET Framework on Windows anymore. .NET Core is fully open source. It runs anywhere. .NET Core 3 is a great version to start on if you haven't been doing .NET lately, or if you've been doing .NET primarily with .NET Framework 4.7 or 4.8. .NET Core 3 is a good time to move forward. I'll explain that in a little bit. I also want to point out that it's really, really exciting that the community is getting involved. There's a lot of community pull requests. It's all on GitHub. It's entirely open source. Even now, in 2019, people still get confused, and bosses and companies and suits still don't get that .NET is open source. And not a little bit open source, completely open source on GitHub. The compiler is open source, the runtime is open source, all the way down to the metal. Okay? It's a good thing. Now, it is released. .NET Core 3.0 is released. You can go to .NET, that's .NET. You can go and get .NET Core 3. Now, it includes support for Windows Forms and WPF. Those are Windows things. That can be a little bit confusing. I'm going to talk about that. It also supports what's called side-by-side and self-contained EXEs. I'm going to show you that. Again, we'll spend time looking at code at the command line. All right? It's also important to point out that not only is .NET Core 3 released, but with it, C#8. C#8 is also released. C#8 is the newest version of C#. It is out, and you get all these great new language features with C#8 in .NET Core 3.0. And then we also have Blazor that we'll talk about a little bit. C#8 is just wonderful. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it here, but I just want you to associate that that new version of C# is out today as well, which is really, really cool. Okay? Now, let's step away from slides, because slides are fun, but we really want to do some stuff at the command line. Now, this is my screen here, and I'm going to go and run the new Windows terminal. I'm just using the Windows terminal because I think it's cool. You can use whatever makes you happy. But I want to show you the command line because I think it's important, in my opinion, how to know how to drive a manual transmission car, manual stick car. There's automatic shift cars, there's Ubers, but if you're going to drive a car, it's nice to know how to change the engine, fix the engine, how to change the tires, how to change the oil, rather. It's nice to know one layer underneath. So while I could do an entire demo in Visual Studio and never show you the command line, because I want you to really understand what's happening, I was going to spend a little bit of time at the command line here to kind of kick off your local .NET Conf event. Now in the terminal, of course, in the new Windows terminal, I've got tabs, so I can open up lots of things. I've got DOS, I've got PowerShell, I've got Ubuntu, We'll talk about that in a little bit. But if I go out here to DOS and I say where.net, look where it is. C program files .net .exe. In the past, where's .net? Well, it's in C, Windows, Microsoft .net framework. It lives in here, right? That's the .net framework. That's the one that ships with Windows now. It's supported. It'll be supported forever as long as Windows is supported. You get updates through Windows Update. This is the original Windows-only framework. But .NET Core lives here in C program files .NET. And inside there, I can have lots of different SDKs. I can have side-by-side .NETs, which is really interesting. Now, the one we're going to focus on right now is .NET Core. That's the only one that we really care about, okay? So let's just go into an empty folder here, and I'm going to say .NET New. .NET is the command line that's doing all the work here. And the very first time I run it, it'll run off some stuff, and see, look, it says templates, and then look at this short name right here. See this short name? I can say .NET New Console, .NET New Unit Test, or .NET New React application. All of these are great templates for you to make new projects. Let's do this. .NET New Console, and I'm going to say My Console. I'm going to put it in a folder called My Console. Okay. And let's go into the folder called My Console. See how simple this is. It's just program.cs. I'll open it in Notepad to just show you how basic it is. Hello world. Okay? If I say .NET Run, let's watch this and let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4. That seems kind of slow. You might say, is .NET slow? No, .NET Run actually does a restore and a build, a complete compile. Oops. Complete compile, build, and then it runs it. But what did it actually make? Let's go and look at that bin folder. There's the executable, My Console. Let's go and say My Console. Look how fast that is. So I want to point out that .NET Run is a great way to run your application when you're developing it. But then, of course, now with .NET Core 3, I'll just run that console. .NET Core 3 creates this executable as a way for you to run that application, but the real app lives inside this console DLL. In fact, I can say .NET My Console DLL, and that runs it. So the code is inside here. Now let's take that apart. I'm going to take it apart with an application called DNSpy. Let's go and open that up. Go to my desktop, to the folder called Demos. We'll grab that file. Now this is really interesting. This is a decompiler. And you can notice here, I can see the language, the intermediate language. Look at those two lines. Hello world, console.writeline. Okay? I can look at them as C#. Now this isn't the actual code. It's just a presentation of the code. I can even see what hello world looks like in Visual Basic. What I've done is I've decompiled my application, you see? And I can look at it right there. Notice that there's nothing that says Windows there. There's nothing that says this version of the framework or that version of the framework. This is very open, generic code that runs anywhere. I wonder if we could run that anywhere. Do you think? Let's try an experiment. I'm going to leave Windows, and I'm going to go over here to Ubuntu. Now this is using WSL. WSL is the Windows subsystem for Linux. This is a real Ubuntu machine running on Windows. Let's go to my desktop, where we put that stuff. I think we put it in a folder called demos. My console. And it's in bin, .NET Core app. And I'm going to say .NET here. This is .NET 3. This is an Ubuntu version of .NET. This is a Linux .NET. In fact, I can say where.NET, or I think it's which on Ubuntu, and it tells me it's not in C program files, it's in /user/bin.net, which is interesting. But can I go and run this DLL on Ubuntu? I can. Look at that. So we made the DLL in Windows, we compiled it. We're now running it with a different .NET runner from Ubuntu. I'm showing you this because I think it's important to understand that you decide how portable your .NET application is. What's inside of this .NET application? What's inside? What's inside is console.writeline. So on Ubuntu, it writes to that console. On Windows, it writes to this console. If I were going to go and put that somewhere else and run it on a different platform, however they decided to go and make console would dictate if it was possible. So that means that .NET Core is portable. It's portable. But remember before I said that it works with Windows Forms. That's kind of interesting. Let's go back over to Windows and go into Demos and say .NET New again. And you can see here it says WinForms. That's interesting. That's a very Windows thing. Let's go and say .NET New WinForms, my WinForms app. And we'll go into my WinForms app. I'm going to say .NET Run. And this will be a little bit slow for the very first time because it's going to compile everything. And there's the app. Okay. This is a Windows Forms app. Okay. Let's go and see in the bin folder. Again, you can do all of this with Visual Studio, but I want to show you how to do it from the command line so that you know how to fix things if they go wrong. So you see how fast that is? See how nice that is? Boom. Now, this is a Windows app, a Windows Forms app with the .NET Core runtime inside. So the engine, the heart of this application is .NET Core runtime. Let's see if we can prove that. I'm going to go and say Process Explorer. This is a great tool that lets you see inside the process. So let's run Process Explorer real quick. And we'll put this application over here. And then Process Explorer is going to pop up. And I'm going to look inside this application. We called it My WinForms app. Let's right-click on that and say Properties. And look inside. You see the core CLR, the core common language runtime. That's really interesting. So we ran our WinForms app. It's being executed with .NET Core. But look at this. It's using Windows functions. So it's okay to make a .NET application that runs for Windows using .NET Core. Remember earlier, I held up a Raspberry Pi. I can write a .NET Core application that runs on the Raspberry Pi. It could say hello world, it could talk to the console, it can talk to the keyboard. But as soon as I do something that is Raspberry Pi specific, if I talk to the GPIO pins, the general purpose IO pins, now it's a Raspberry Pi app. That doesn't change how .NET behaves. It's just making the point that if I make a call to a native API or a hardware API, now that application isn't portable anymore. And that's okay because I'm writing a Raspberry Pi app or a watch app. Not every app automatically becomes cross-platform. So in this case, we have a Windows Forms app that is now specific to Windows. If I go and look at that application and its code, you can see that it actually brings in system.windows.forms. It uses a NuGet package, and it runs that form. This means that you'll be able to take your existing .NET framework applications, your full framework applications that run on Windows today. They might be a little bit older. Perhaps you made the application yesterday. You can go and change that from being .NET Framework to .NET Core. You're basically taking your car and you're swapping the engine out and putting a new, faster, cooler engine inside, but it's still your car. Does that make sense? It's pretty cool stuff. So I want to point that out. Here my application ran on Ubuntu and it also ran on Windows, but then I made a Windows specific application that runs only on Windows. But you can write anything with .NET Core as at the engine level. Okay, that's pretty cool stuff. Now in the future, we're going to try to take these and combine them. I'll do that again. The .NET Framework over here on Windows, Mono and Xamarin. Mono is open source. Xamarin powers Android and iPhone applications. .NET Core is cross-platform. We're going to kind of combine those in the future and call it .NET 5, and that's going to be basically one .NET for all things. That's going to be pretty cool. That's in the future. But currently, here's what the schedule looks like. We just released .NET Core 3. That's out today. Later this year in November, .NET Core 3.1 will be out, and it's what's called an LTS release. That's a long-term support version of .NET. It's going to be supported for years. And then here's the cool part. Every other year, you're going to get a new long-term support version. So if you want the new fresh stuff, you can get those on the even numbered years. And if you want a long-term support version, then you can go and get that. The other thing I want to show you is the .NET web page. This is the main website for .NET. I want to remind you that you click download and you can get .NET for Windows, for Linux, for Mac, for Docker. And then we made a bunch of videos for you. We're going to translate these into local languages and try to have captions for those languages. But what we have here are about 80 videos to teach people C#. This is a 19-part series on C#. We've got an 8-part series on .NET Core, 13-part series on ASP.NET Core, and we also talk about Xamarin and Docker, machine learning, Apache Spark. All of these videos are free, and you can find them if you just go to .NET/videos. So I hope that gives you a sense of what's going on in the .NET community right now, and I think it's really great that you all are celebrating .NET Conf. I hope you have a great day. Bye.